I had this one class. Actually, we're wrapping it up this week tomorrow.
Yeah.
It was really nice. It was on music and memory. So we had
Wow.
a collaboration with the Ravensbrück Memorial,
Ah,
Roma
okay.
Women's Concentration Camp.
Yes, yes.
And so in the first part of the class, like students learned about Ravensbrück and what happened in Ravensbrück.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
discussed about new forms of remembrance, like how can we
Oh,
use the arts, like different
wow.
artistic formats,
Mm-hmm.
from rap to poetry, poetry slam, sound art. How can we make use of these forms for memory work in
Yeah.
order to remember what happened? And so the students, they took part in workshops by a rapper and a poetry slammer.
Wow.
And
Really? Wow.
eventually, in the last stage of the class, they produced podcasts on the theme of new forms of
Oh,
remembrance. And so there we're publishing them actually tomorrow for the International Holocaust
fantastic. Fantastic.
Remembrance Day. And it was awesome because there were 20 people in the class and 20 people actually passed the class because they stayed until the very end. Like everybody who
Wow.
signed up also contributed to the podcast. And that was cool.
Oh,
That
that
was
was
really,
cool.
I really enjoyed doing that. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm so happy. I'm
a
so
nice
happy for you.
format.
Yeah. Music and memory. That's something we could. I was. I'm invoking collective memory because I had certain pieces that were dealing with the martial law years and all that stuff and collective memory. And when I performed it, can you imagine? It's Neue Musik. It's a different language. It's not pop music, but I had like people from the sociology department and all that stuff, and they were like weeping because the sounds had this invoke collective memory. And I think
Yeah.
more than just music. So it's not music. It's sound. So we could explore that thing. That's fantastic. In the meantime, I was like I told you in the message I gave you is that I'm now very interested in the notion of perception and cognition. This might also cover grounds of memory too,
Mm.
because it's cognition now and perception. But while this topic is really very difficult, it's very fluid because we can never, as musicologists or as musicians, as practitioners, we can never actually say how do people perceive because we couldn't go into the minds of the people. But there are certain ways by which perhaps we could assume that maybe this thing happens in the minds of a person. Like, how come people have a big audience? How come we have a big audience for more complex pop music like Steely Dan, for example? You're familiar with
Mm.
Steely Dan? Or with the Chick Corea and his the things he's doing. I mean, these are not like these are things which you sit down and listen to and witness and enjoy and appreciate in the same way and the complexities of the kind of music they're writing. It's already like contemporary classical music in a way. I mean, I see online Steely Dan or Chick Corea concerts. I'm just naming two examples where people are just quiet, like listening to a Beethoven concert, or that in that sense of it. And what goes on in the mind? I've always been fascinated with that, and that thing I sort of slightly addressed in this recently written paper, which is being reviewed to be published. But the paper is actually about Jose Maceda,
Yeah.
my teacher, and my other teacher, Matthias Schwalinger. And apparently, um, so it's this Filipino and this German teacher, and I in the paper I was constructing an analytic framework based on the Hegelian notion of Aufheben, sublation.
Oh, can you tell me a bit about that? Because I'm not familiar with the
Okay,
concept.
so in phenomenology of the spirit, Hegel actually outlines the very mechanism of dialectics. He calls it Aufhebung or Aufheben. I mean, and apparently it's when the transformation of a thing is when the thing itself, the entity, negates itself, because he says that in every entity lies its own negation. So the idea of dialectics actually is transformation. And so that, for example, in a tree, for example, the tree starts as a seed, and it becomes a root, and it becomes a tree, whatever. It
Like this
becomes a
is
tree. The tree and the seeds are not the same thing, but the tree, the seed had
develops. It's like,
developed, and
yeah,
yeah,
I'm familiar with Hegel's philosophy of history, and that
yeah,
idea how it, you know, it's not a straight path, but it's
yeah,
kind of, it moves in in these dialectic circles.
yes, yes. And so
It has
apparently,
these detours, and but eventually it develops into something.
yes, and this notion underlying that notion is really Aufheben,
Mm.
sublation, where in the German sense, I believe, and you're a German, you can tell me that the word has a double meaning of canceling out and both preserving
Yeah,
aspects of
yeah,
being.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what Aufheben is, and so
Preserving
apparently
and
I.
neutralizing, or yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
so apparently I used that as a framework for analysis of the music of Maceda and Spalinger. But I couldn't discuss the whole thing now. But the essence of what I was the framework actually is that the musical process actually is sublation itself. Musical process is sublation when because music occurs in time. A listener can ideally, I'm just saying ideally, and this is just an assumption on my part, a listener can perhaps has the potential of witnessing transformation of materials, negation of materials, which actually is seeing sublation or Aufheben before his ears and mind. It occurs before the ears and the mind.
Mm.
And apparently, with this notion, you can say that music is the most potent human endeavor that can actually show sublation occurring. And but of course, with this kind of assumption comes also the assumption of the specific conditions of production. Like my take on that is that I was dealing with contemporary classical music, so the assumption was that this is performed in a space, a concert space, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah,
a
I guess
concert
that's
space,
the,
and where you have a delineation, clear delineation between who the performers are and the audience are.
mm.
And because it's a performance space, it also has assumptions of a behavioral aspect of production, wherein the performers perform, and ideally the audience sit down and listen. I mean, it's different if you
Yeah,
go to a rock concert where that's a different matter. You go to a rock concert where everything is happening in a different way. There's surfing, there's all of that happening, and that's a different matter. And I did not deal with that in the paper, although I'd like to deal with that,
mm.
especially that's why it's good I'm discussing with you, because in a rock concert, for example, it's my only assumption from my life as a rocker in the 70s is that uh, I'm that old, man. And is that what you like to listen to in a rock concert are the live performances of what you know in recordings. it's the live manifestation. It gives you this notion, oh, this thing is alive, it's real. What I have in my in the 70s in my vinyl or in my cassette or in my CD in the 90s is actually being done by people, and I'm enjoying it. I can see them and I'm part of it. I dance with it, and it's a celebration of that. And that's a different mode of perception and a different kind of reception, so to say. But I'm interested in what goes on in the mind in the listening of the music. I don't know in in pop music, but the only thing I could say about in pop music is that if you see the typical form of pop music, I'm talking as a musicologist, not as a listener, but as a musicologist, the typical form, the simplest form of pop music is the AABA song form, right? You have a verse, another verse, and then a chorus or a refrain, and then maybe another verse, and then the refrain. The refrain, I think, is where the song usually gravitates because it's where the hook is located. The hook, the song, the theme, the main theme, which apparently finds its way into the consciousness and the subconsciousness of the listeners that it's what is retained. So like if I could talk from the pop music of the 70s in Manila, the pop music like those from many composers, even Ryan Kayabyab where the AABA form is used, the most important aspect in for the consumer, I think, and I'm talking as one who listened to music also in the 70s, is the chorus because I retained that chorus. I could hear that. And when I buy that record, I might not even know the title, but I could tell the record seller this chorus thing, not even the title or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that aspect of listening actually also entails a certain level of consciousness on that part. I don't know about indie music because I was listening to some recent indie music. I have a member of my ensemble also has an indie band, uh, and he produces music this time online. I think you met him, Owen Castro. Um, he they have this place right near UP campus. It's a small pub where they have indie musicians playing. But I listen to the music, but it's I'm kind of taken back because I don't hear the same formulations. I mean I'm that old. I don't hear the same formulations as I knew in the 70s and the 80s of song forms in that song. I mean and my appreciation, I'm trying to get into it to appreciate that or
yeah, I think it has become more and more diverse. That's my impression. That the
yes,
whole field
yes,
of popular music has really diversified, and probably also the internet and changing listening habits have contributed to that.
yeah,
My
yeah,
impression is that, you know, when I grew up in the well, 90s, when I started going to gigs in
I
the
was in
90s,
Germany. I was in Germany when you were a kid. I was studying.
so in the 90s, I mean, I grew up in the 80s as well, but I have
Yeah,
never been, you know, to a show in the 80s, so I can tell. But from my experience in the 90s, you really had this focus on, you know, genres. You had these, you know,
yeah,
music scenes, or to use
yeah,
an old
yeah,
term, like
yeah,
subcultures, and you were
yeah.
part of that circle. I remember in my hometown, I was really, you know, part of this, you know, more the punk circuit,
Oh
folk.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that was really, it was, you really had this focus on, you know, genre, and that was the type of music that you listened to, the CDs you bought back in the day. But
yeah,
now when I see my students, I feel like it has really changed. Like people's musical taste is, they have really diversified, and the way they
yeah.
listen to music because of Spotify and, you know, all these streaming platforms, I think it has contributed to that. And
Yes.
also because what I'm seeing right now with the very young people, also, for example, my boyfriend's daughter, she's really
Mm,
into K-pop.
Okay,
So
A-pop. What's A?
K-pop,
Am
K-pop,
K,
Korean,
K.
yeah,
Oh,
K-pop,
yeah, yeah,
Korean
yeah.
popular music.
Wow.
So
Okay.
my impression is that also the former focus of popular music being something that's very dominated from a Northern American and very Anglophone and possibly UK perspective, that this is also to at least some extent changing with
Oh,
phenomena like K-pop. So it's really becoming more and more diverse in terms of the types of songs um, that people listen to, but also in terms of the images, I guess, that are associated with popular music.
yeah. I have a K-pop. I remember the daughter of a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine. Her daughter loves Blackpink. That's
Yes,
K-pop.
Blackpink and BTS,
But
they're
and
happy
when my friend,
rotation.
yeah, when my friend told me that her daughter loves Blackpink, so okay, I was just so curious. I took a look at Blackpink. It's a different kind of it's fascinating because it's a different kind of production. They have this song with Elena something, an American, I forgot whatever, uh, but it's a whole production. The whole thing, the whole video, is in itself. So if we are looking in the notion of perception,
Mm,
it's what is today is more than just listening. It's seeing the visual thing,
yes.
and then the formulas, the dance steps, and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and it's actually more complex than just merely listening to
Mm,
music. You're watching music, you're buying music, you're buying objects of music. There's this other thing. I'm still talking of this. The daughter of a friend of mine. Um, you buy a CD and it has certain things there. You could easily get the music on Spotify or maybe YouTube, but you still want to buy the CD because in the CD you have an object and maybe there are
yeah.
pictures there, and that makes music also an object, this tangible thing which you can collect. I mean, it's no longer just listening. I saw musical perception has become even more complex in that sense as an
Mm,
experience,
yeah.
and appreciation is even so holistic. And if you go back into the indie, the notion of indie, and this question of uh, poetry, for example, in the indie sense, um, the poetry is very complex. The poetry is very uh, like this colleague of my young colleague of mine, Owen. Um, he just came out with a song, a very beautiful song, which if you listen to the opening, it's like Neue Musik. I mean, I was like fascinated because he was a member of my ensemble. He's a member of my ensemble, which plays Neue Musik in the contemporary classical sense, right? Schwalinger, all those things. But his opening is like that, and then he comes in with his vocals, and I said, and it has a following, and I said, uh, that means that it's no longer. Am I right in saying that it's no longer genre oriented? It's like the notion of genre is it's dead, or what do you think of it? Genre, does it
I
exist
think
as a
genre, it's still there, but it's not the main reference point for many people anymore. So I think it's still a
okay?
classification that's used by people to also promote music, but then
What are typical genres now? Like you have indies as a genre, or
that's very complicated. It is, I would say,
what? I couldn't even
more
name one genre now. It's like
it can be a indie, you can regard it as like a practice, music
yeah,
that's produced independently, and then you have different genres, music
yeah,
of
yeah,
different genres produced
yeah.
as
So
indie.
it's indie is more about the practice, or it's a mode
Yes,
of
but
production,
then there's
maybe a
also
mode of production, right? I mean, in that sense.
but then there's also the indie, like if you have indie pop or indie rock from the 90s,
Uh,
or in the
uh-huh.
even in the Philippines in the early 2000s.
You know, I'll
Use it
tell you,
also
yeah,
as a genre.
because in the 90s it was really like genres were like modes of behavior. Like in the Philippines, I remember in the 90s, it was either you're either the joke was, but this is true. The joke was you're either hip hop or metal.
Hmm.
So if you're hip hop, you have a way of dressing up. You have a circle, and if you're metal, you have a way of dressing up. And apparently there were turf wars, actual physical turf wars. I remember one metal or one rock artist, I couldn't mention his name here, was mugged at the Araneta Coliseum because was mugged by this other group, and it's that serious. And but that's over now because it's no longer. I mean, the modes of dressing are no longer in fashion, but apparently it has turned more. I think fluid would be the term. Monica,
Yeah,
would you
yeah,
agree that
yeah.
it's more fluid? I mean, if a guy wants to listen to this music, it's all available on Spotify, whatever. It's just really discovering, and even Spotify can suggest artists from your playlist, and then
Yeah,
it has
that's true.
it's like a monster. It's like a psychological monster that can suggest or okay,
Yeah,
it's telling you, why don't you listen to this, why don't you listen to this, and it's all in the name of late capitalist modernity and all that stuff. And then apparently um and you can widen your scope. Like my Spotify account is kind of weird because I listen to everything I want to. Sometimes I listen to Neue Musik, sometimes I listen to Beethoven, sometimes I listen to Renaissance and medieval music. Then I listen to Chick Corea, and then I listen to pop. Whatever comes to mind, whatever is in my mood, I play, or Jethro Tull. And so I have like 4 or 5 of those, you know, those playlists they give you every week. I think they're kind of mixed up what I listen to. I mean, that would have been very difficult. Uh, but talking, looking back at this the daughter of your boyfriend, who has a specific preference for K-pop, is that like a what are the modes of behavior related to that? Is there, would you observe anything like uh, the way people dress, the way people? My daughter loves J-pop.
Mm,
That's a different. She said it's a different. It's very different from K-pop, and
yeah.
I've heard examples of J-pop, and I've in my early YASPAM in the 90s, my early YASPAM meetings in Japan, I was able to listen to J-pop, uh, meeting prominent people who are producers because they come into the YASPAM, and I was very close with Toru Mitsui, who was in Kanazawa University, and he like started he was like started the YASPAM thing in Japan, and all those scholars there, but that was the 90s, and of course things grow, and I don't think there are certain ways of behavior or anything. Or
Yeah, ways of behavior.
I mean,
For
not behavior, but
for
in the
some
sense that
people, yes,
like in metal, they have ways of dressing. I mean, things like those.
yeah.
Are certain
I think that
attitudes.
there are for the more extreme and possibly also older K-pop fans. I mean, she's only 11, right? So she's not really
Okay,
into
okay.
fashion yet. But I felt that aspect that you mentioned before, really the how essential the videos and the visual
Yeah,
aspects
yeah.
are. It's clearly visible. It's not only about listening to the music, but it's also about that whole aesthetic. And what I noticed also, some of the kids, like even at a very young age, they're also really interested in Korean culture through K-pop. So it kind of
Oh,
sparked that interest, you know,
oh.
in Korean
Are you
from
talking up Europe? Are you talking up Europe?
yes, like
Wow.
ranging from Korean iced tea to learning the Korean, like self learning the Korean language via YouTube video,
Wow.
stuff like that. So I know kids who really are trying to learn Korean from watching YouTube videos and who are really into, like the
and
Korean
this
foods and stuff. So yeah.
wow, and this was facilitated perhaps by K-pop. It has
Yes.
brought it.
Yeah. So kind of like an entry point, a window into a new world that they
Wow.
get to explore. But it's interesting since we talked about reception, and again shows that it's not only about music as sound, it is about so much more. It's about the other components of intermediate components of music, the
Yeah.
videos, for example, or also experiencing the community aspect at shows or concerts. But then it's also about the broader, in some instances, about the broader context, like
Yep.
learning about a new culture, for example.
Yes. Yes.
All
What about
becomes
the culture? I mean, this is the bubblegum culture. I mean, sorry for the term, but in the 70s we called that bubblegum. I don't know if you still use the term bubblegum pop. But I think it's a racist. No, not racist. It's a derogatory term. I don't like to use the
Yeah,
term
yeah,
seriously, but bubblegum because it's like gives certain value. I mean, this is like the conflict between pop and classical. I mean that's a dead dialectic. But for lack of a better term, this bubblegum kind of culture, the way they dress, the colors. When I looked at this clip, I noticed the colors were so bright. It was like they were bright colored pinkish things, and of course it's called black pink, so I'd expect that. And apparently this notion of creating sensations, is that done in a live context? You think it's done in a live context? I haven't seen a live concert of a
me neither.
of. Uh,
I,
I was just
I,
wondering what happens in the live context. I mean, the same colors, the same, because the colors and sound and colors, they can go together, uh, and invoke a certain kind of consciousness, and which apparently later on becomes memory in that sense. I mean, color color and sound as associated with
yeah.
geknuft, clampered, interlocked with each other. That's a better term. Interlocked with each other can suggest a certain kind of experience that uh, cannot be verbalized, but it's there. I mean, in that sense. So when I saw this clip, the single clip, I said I noticed the colors of the whole production, the whole production, the colors of the production, and and I said it's a match with the music. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't. For example, if I see something in black and white, if I see, for example, a Charlie Parker clip and it's made in sepia, in black and white, it's so appropriate in that sense, and I would listen to the music and be fascinated by the artist in that, and it gives me a sense of time that it's like, if it's Charlie Parker, it's the 1950s, and sort of gives me a sense of time in that sense. And so, and even if I look at videos of the 1910s, for example, which were in black and white, gives me this sense of time. And
Yeah.
when they colorized it, they colorized it. Recently, they have so many digital colorizations of early films. Apparently, it doesn't give me the same sensation of remoteness in that sense. I mean, in that sense, and apparently the suggestion of color and visual experience as conflated with music, with sound, is actually a very important aspect of perception, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how is it in Spotify, for example? When things were still normal here, I'd ride the MRT to Makati, and I sit down beside two or three people who are tuned to Spotify in their phones. The private the private consumption of music in a public space. In that sense, I mean, and it just goes on and sleeps and it just goes on. I mean, what what is the impact of Spotify in that sense with regards to reception and perception?
Mm,
Because I
I'm
was
a,
speculate.
I
No,
think
no,
I'm a,
I was yes. Well, go ahead, go
but
ahead, go
it
ahead.
is a continuation of a previous medium, right?
Yes.
It started in the 1980s with the Sony Walkman, and so it's kind of, it's kind of part of this. So listening to Spotify on the train, I guess it's sort of like an extension of that. But then what's different is really what we talked about before, that you don't listen to the cassette or to the CD that has really the cassette even more than the CD, but it's really
Yeah.
fixed order of songs and a very limited selection.
Yeah.
It's really this, you have access to this really wide universe of
Yeah.
music, but which on the other hand is also heavily structured by these algorithms. And that's something people tend to forget. You have this idea that you can find almost any type of music on Spotify, but in fact, I guess um, there's some music that you will never ever get to discover because you don't look for it, and so the
Mm.
algorithms are not going to recommend that. So possibly what we talked about before about this diversification also of
Yeah.
listening to music, it also has certain limits, I guess, that are also the limits that have to do with people's knowledge of music or curiosity or
Mm.
not knowing about certain types of music, not knowing what to look for, and then also by the technology itself and the way that these platforms are programmed and the way that they also highlight particular content, and other content it's not going to get played or just going to get a very limited number of plays to make things more complicated.
It makes it more complicated. Precisely, precisely.
It's very
Yeah.
complicated.
The simple Walkman in the 70s. I was so fascinated with it. It's like I could bring my stereo around it. And but I was my take on that was that I don't know if my assumption is right, but it's just an assumption. In fact, it's a speculation that Spotify, or these streaming music audio things on your gadgets actually extends the concert experience. Does it extend the concert experience in any way? Do you think or is it's such a different incommensurable
Mhm.
experience? Does it extend or am I just talking about myself? Because I listen to music, any kind of music when I'm on Spotify. During that time when we're able to go out, it's in my phone, and I listen to any kind of music, Webern or even pop or rock or jazz, whatever. But uh, and I enjoy it as the way I enjoy music, where this is a fine structure. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
great technique. I mean, I'm talking, I'm listening as a professor or
Yeah, yeah.
as a
It's
music,
very
and
analytical approach.
and I
to
think
listening.
it keeps me away from the other kind of reality of how people listen to. And I'm so interested in how people listen to music, how people uh, if ever there is any cognitive process happening in the mind. And that's
Mm.
what actually what I'm trying to drive up, cognition. And it's like we were like touching on that in our a while ago with regards to K-pop being a total experience and all that stuff. and the cognition actually goes there, and up to the tangibility of music in terms of a material thing which you order with a poster and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And my daughter recently ordered some uh, pictures of her favorite group in Japan called Jump. Musically, they're very good, and apparently, and but that's part of the, it's part of the excitement goes with the music. I mean, and it goes, and but Spotify or things like those, they just concentrate on the sound, or it doesn't end there. It's very difficult.
The interesting thing is that the rise of MP3 and later on streaming it went hand in hand with the also rise of live music. So it's somehow connected.
Of what? Of
yeah,
live music?
live music, of concerts, yes. I mean, like concert prices, they've really gone up in the last couple of years. And also, what I know from Germany is that's pre-COVID, right? I'm not sure. It's not like that right now.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID, the live music sector was really the one that was flourishing. If you compare it to recorded music, and nobody's buying CDs anymore. Some people are into vinyl records as the collectible items, but that's really a small segment. And so I guess lots of the money in the music industries is really in that field of live music and licensing, of course, but live music. And I think it is connected, and there's studies that I could pull out somewhere that show you the connection. I guess, was it Fabian Holt who did research on that?
Okay.
I would have to look it up, how live music actually is, the rise of live music is also connected to the fact that people discover music on the internet. They discover music and they want to get that live experience, because that is something that's obviously missing from the recorded music. Again, showing that music is so much more than sound. So it's also about the being there, the interaction,
the being there thing,
people, and that experience of live music. And what's interesting also, if you go, you no longer do that, but before last year, back in 2019, and people were filming them on their mobile phones, like somehow trying to preserve the experience, and also showing other people like, hey, I'm part of this, I'm posting it on TikTok or whatever to show that.
You can find that. You can find that in even in YouTube, right? Certain people who are, and it becomes legal. I don't know. I mean,
and it's like this, experience and being part of something. That's also
and you want to preserve that.
And that's something that Spotify cannot offer, or Apple Music or whatever platform. It's really something that you have to go to the concert, to the gig, and be there.
Since we're into that, and live is live, and apparently during the lockdown last year, we had to redefine what live is. What do you think is the impact of the lockdown in that sense? I mean, on that notion of live being. I premiered a new composition in October, and it was performed live. There was an audience, a number of people, but they're producing a video because it was not really readily available to many people. And what do you think is the impact of this lockdown thing?
Oh man, I wish I could find my notes.
Oh, why?
Little project I'm doing right now with my friend Ren Aguilar. I'm not sure if you know him. He's in Manila as well. So we started doing this little project that deals exactly with this issue of liveness. We looked at
we could invite him next time. We could do another video and publish it with Ren, and we could do it. Let's talk about that.
We're still in the middle of that research, but
by
by the end of March, we'll have our findings ready. So we looked at the closure of Route 196, the club.
Okay.
And looked at the final the final show organized by the production group Red Ninja.
Okay.
And they tried to bring the atmosphere of Route 196 with its different components, its visual aspects,
Okay.
its auditory aspects, and the community aspects, and also the food, the drinks, whatever is involved in that Route 196 experience. Bring that to the live, to the farewell show. So, and it had a lot to do also with notions of liveness. You know, liveness.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't. Maybe next time I can elaborate on it.
Yeah. We'll do another video on that.
The different notions of liveness. So in liveness, you can have that simultaneous experience, be it to be in the same place. But liveness can also be about interaction and exchange about what is currently happening. Also, being in touch with, you know, that connection between audience and performer. So it has all these different levels. And so what we're currently looking at is how they simulate also that live experience. And maybe simulating is not even the
but that would be fascinating, how simulation of liveness. But of course, the simulation of liveness is still not liveness. You're not live.
And that's the weird thing. Yeah, I would argue that to a certain extent, what they did was really live, and it was a live gig in a way. Albeit of a very different kind. But you could see in the comment section, it was broadcasted on Facebook, and in the comment section, you could see the people interacting. You could see people doing what they would usually do at Route 196. People would go like, Dalawang red horse, and you know, stuff like that. They would order food, and then suddenly like the, what is he? Was he like the janitor or something? Like one of the guys one of the staff members. So he would enter the conversation, and people would go like, "Oh, Kuya Mats," like they would usually do in the venue. So they kind of transported that to into the Facebook gig context, and also the way the organizers tried to create that atmosphere through visual aspects. So they had like a 3D animation of the venue that you could see, and they also had a recreation of the venue. I guess it was done by an artist in Minecraft. Wow. So you had this visual representation, and then they also had a sonic representation of the atmosphere. They recreated it, actually. It was not something that was originally recorded in the venue, but they recreated it and said, you know, they did like the balut guy that would come around at midnight, and someone would get balut, you know. So they recreated what was typical of the venue in sound, in music, and then they of course had this lineup of the bands.
Were they playing in real time? Were the bands playing in real time? They were playing in real time?
No, it was pre-recorded. That was pre-recorded for reasons of
but if it's pre-recorded, it's really creating the atmosphere around there. That's fascinating.
It was not about playing live in terms of there's the band and it's playing at the same time that I'm watching. That was not the case for none of the artists. It was all pre-recorded, and some of the bands, you know, they played as a band. You could see them in one screenshot, and in others you could see it was like this, the Zoom videos with the different screens, and it was recorded, you know, not simultaneously, obviously, but it was like a multi-track recording. Yeah, it was really fascinating to watch, and it was I guess it was received to be, people considered it to be a live event, despite the fact that the essential component of the band playing live at the same time was lacking. And that's interesting, I guess.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. My last live performance was in California. I was so lucky because it was September of 2019, and I have this. Well, this is what my paper was about in Lüneburg 2019, 2020 last year. But apparently it's like the live performance, and I was imagining if this was the lockdown, this would never, my performance would never happen because I I don't really believe in simulating liveness in that sense, because if you simulate liveness, it's really dead. Actually, you're just simulating it. I am fascinated by that, but I also have this notion of, okay, at the end of the day, it's not live. It's
Yeah, and I was
creative. It's
there's different layers of
yeah,
liveness,
yeah.
and some are in that online experience, some of the layers are simply lacking, but then others are
Yeah.
becoming more important, and obviously for many
Yes.
people they
Yes.
manage to somehow fill the gap. But
Yeah,
I can
that's the
totally
point. That's the
understand
point.
that
That's the point that that's the point that the certain feeling of liveness actually made it a very significant experience for those who were present. I mean, uh, it's not like they're watching from afar, but they're actually feeling they're part of the whole thing. It's something which is very interesting to look at.
and it's a matter of perspective also. If you
Yeah,
ask liveness, for who? For the audience, yes, but for the people who recorded these songs, you know, they had probably had a friend with a camera recording it, and they were there without an audience. So for them, it must have been or even like the people who did the split screen thing, who
yeah,
recorded
yeah.
something probably totally on their own at home with the computer, you know. I guess that's different. It must have been a very different experience for these people. So
Yeah.
there, that live aspect of being able to engage with the audience is really lacking. Whereas the
Yeah,
audience can somehow make up for that, engaging with each other and having that atmosphere from the
yeah.
club.
But I'm not to diminish the experience and whatever sensations that the audience experience from that thing. But actually, what I could see there is like you make liveness as an object here. It's an object. It's
Mm.
an object that could be created. It's an object
Yeah,
that
yeah.
can be temporarily tangible in that sense. I mean, I freeze it into this timeline, and I can watch. I could rewatch that thing, that liveness, and you can see that it's a liveness of a. It's a liveness that was created. It's a liveness that is. It's very. I think we should go into that direction in talking about perception and reception in these days, especially of the lockdown. I have there are concerts that are scheduled. There are performances that are scheduled. The sad thing is that in the Philippines, many musicians are actually penniless now. They don't have productions. They don't have gigs. They don't have. Many of my students who are playing, who used to be playing in gigs, don't have gigs. They're unemployed and all that stuff. And so, despite the fact that you can produce that, the monetary returns are actually not guaranteed in that sense. I mean,
Yes.
people have to pay for that. I mean, that's the thing. And it actually puts this reality of this the material aspect of production of that. I mean, maybe the musicians were paid for that. I don't know. I'm not sure. But the actual exchange value, if you'd like to call it, the exchange value of a performance, the actual exchange value is actually not congruent.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
that's one aspect that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I agree. That's a huge problem, and also one that has been intensified through the pandemic, I guess, because people pay
Yeah.
here in Germany, people pay to see bands playing live. And so, especially the more
Yeah.
prominent bands,
Yeah.
people are really paying good money to see these bands playing live. But people don't
Yeah.
buy CDs anymore. They listen to
Yeah.
music
And can you
online, and we
imagine?
all know the problem with, you know, the how
Yeah.
much money Spotify, Apple, and so on are actually giving to the artists. It's hardly anything. And so when the live
Yeah.
music part just vanishes, that's all people are left with. And
Yeah.
I guess the only thing that I've seen that um, seems to be working for some artists is the Patreon. Patreon, is that what it's called?
Patreon
Patreon. Yeah,
in YouTube and other, yeah.
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 So I
There are
guess
people who are willing to give
yeah,
for
people
production.
support
Yeah.
and have like they do like a year subscription, you know, supporting a particular artist, and they receive
Yeah.
performances like exclusive live
Yeah.
streaming or you know, written lyric sheets or whatever in return. So they receive something that's
Yeah.
somewhat
Yeah. Yeah.
exclusive in return for that. And I saw this actually, so quite a number of artists employing that model, and this might be something that works better, especially for the independent artists that are not super well known, than, you know, getting money through Spotify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Which is actually very difficult, and apparently that is the reality that musicians have to face now. Not only in the popular music scene, in like certain ensembles in
Mm,
Germany, for example, have to
yes.
make an extra effort to to earn a living in the first place. I couldn't imagine how difficult it is. I could imagine how difficult it is. By the
Yeah.
way, more so in Asia here.
Yeah.
In the Philippines, it's really zero. I mean, it's like wow. I mean, it's like and it the campaign also you have to pay artists and you have to pay musicians. You pay um, because it's really very difficult. Certain things that I know some musicians who became bikers in this Grab bikers. It's the only
Oh,
mode of
oh no.
yeah, it's only
Ah,
mode of living they could attend to now. I mean,
mm.
and
Yeah, and it's also, I find it really shocking and really sad to see that the current situation really reveals how little acknowledgement and, you know, respect there is for the arts and yeah,
yeah,
music in particular, the arts in general.
yeah,
And that's also, I feel that's also visible here in Germany, where
yeah,
they had these, you know, little compensations for musicians, but it was so hard to get. And I guess, you know, once
yeah,
people applied, it was gone very fast. And it's also not
yeah.
sustainable. You know, it's really,
It's non-sustainable because
it's
the
difficult.
um,
And so much money actually goes into the larger financing, the larger companies like car industries,
oh
airplanes, whatever. That's where the money goes. And these are also the parts of the industry that are still continuing right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
They're not affected by the measures to the same extent that the arts
yeah,
are. It's impossible. You can't go to the museum, to theater, music,
yeah,
concert. Nothing is happening there. It's all shut down. But in other
but
parts, other
yeah,
sections, you feel like, okay, they don't have any problems with COVID. I don't think so. So why is it this imbalance? You know, and you can see that it's clearly economic interests shaping that. Yeah, and yeah, it's sad. Also, we had this concept
mm,
here at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's still used of,
okay,
you know, the essential workers. You know, those who do the essential, you know, work. And
Yeah.
arts, anything that had to do with the arts was not considered
It's not
essential.
considered essential.
And it's like, oh no, oh my, I can feel how essential it is because I miss it so bad. But it's really about
Yeah.
essential. So why is a car more essential than music? Like, I don't see it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really awkward.
Uh, so is it part of perception and reception? This economic milieu.
Yes,
Does it shape perception? It does.
it
In
does.
things we couldn't explain right now.
Oh wow.
Anyway, actually, our discussion has opened so many doors, and apparently, I hope it has also
It
been
has.
stimulating for you.
I
Yeah.
really don't want to be in your shoes, like having to deal with the perception theme and its many avenues. It's
No, it's not really a burden for me. It's actually a fascination. It's something like I've been listening to music since I was a kid, uh, and apparently I have assigned memories in my mind for certain kinds of music and all that stuff. But some people experience music in a different way, perhaps.
but you could also turn this into a class with your students.
Oh
Like have
yeah,
sort of an auto-ethnographic approach to music listening, have
oh
people
yeah.
reflect
Because
their own
yeah,
music listening practices and
yeah,
what are the dimensions that they ascribe importance to and how does it how
yeah,
what factors is it shaped by, and you
yeah,
could
precisely.
have the students discuss and compare the different experiences. Could also be nice.
Yeah, that would be nice. Let's see. Let's talk about it, and we could. Um, and apparently, but what actually what has become a very good advantage to my conceptualization now is actually I could now look at the bigger picture. I mean, discussing with you and the bigger picture of the notion of perception.
Hmm.
Although I'm still biased by my own perception, that's always the danger. But I could always say that because this is what I think, and this is how reflexive my thing is. But I'm really interested in this because apparently I want to know how people listen and why is it important to listen and why is it important, or do people really listen in experiencing music? Do they listen? Do they sit down and listen? I would listen because I'm a musician, but do they sit down and listen? Do they just watch, or are they fascinated, or they excited by watching, or the whole experience? I mean, uh,
Is it different and does it differ according to context also?
yes.
I just had to grade an MA thesis which dealt with how students make use of listening to music when they study. You know, when they
Oh,
focus on
oh,
pre- preparing classwork and
yeah,
writing exam papers and that stuff, and how music can actually also help them focus, and whether the fact that people are, people are musicians, so that influences also the way that they engage with music and make use of music. Yes,
oh,
that was also interesting. It showed that some people really reflexively make use of music for these
yeah,
purposes
in
and
that
are
sense, yeah,
well aware. But I guess there's
yeah,
different. It's really there's different types of listening, and also maybe one person could display a whole range of types of listening according to
mm,
different, depending on
yeah,
context. Also,
yeah,
it might be a very close listener if you listen to music in the concert setting, or you
yeah,
might also just use it as, background music to somehow um, focus on something that you're writing or creative
oh,
work,
yeah,
or sports,
yeah,
for example. So many people use music when they go for a run, for example, or go
mm-hmm.
swimming or whatever, so to support these other activities. And that's of course a
Yeah,
completely different type of listening. Like, can't compare it to listening to music in a concert setting.
Mm, yeah. So much, which reminds me, in the Christmas season, I played Christmas carols here in the house because my daughter is a writer and she works at home, and so she's so stressed. And I'm also writing something. And I just played the Christmas music just to make things feel okay. We're coming to the holidays, and we're gonna have chocolates, and we're gonna have wine and all that stuff. And I celebrate it all by myself, and so that's the thing.
Yeah, it creates a mood, like a certain.
Yeah, yeah, that's thing, and so at least. Anyway, I learned so much, Monica, from this, and apparently this is not the last. Maybe we can do a series of discussions, probably on
Yes.
certain. You think of a topic next time, which we can talk about.
Yeah, maybe we could really talk about the memory thing. I'd be very interested in the memory of the martial law era, and maybe we
Yeah,
could talk about the
let's do
memory
that our
of.
next. Let's
Shall we
make that
do
our
memory
next topic.
of dictatorships and kind of compare musical memories of dictatorships or sounding memories, you know, to be a
Of
bit more open,
dictatorships.
and compare Germany and the Philippines? That might also be a good preparation
Oh,
for
but
our class.
that's my whole life. I mean, my consciousness started from there when I was a kid, and it's just gonna, it's going to be very reflexive. It's going to be very,
Yeah,
when we talk
yeah,
about it, because it's like, it's my whole life. It's how I start. I was a kid, and my brother was incarcerated and all that stuff, and he wrote a lot of songs, and that would be our next topic.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
let's schedule it, and thank you very much also. Thank you very
thank
much.
you,
This is
thank
great.
you.
Okay.
One last thing. I sent you
Oh,
the chapter that I talked about the liveness. I sent you an email with a chapter.
okay, okay. I'll check it out. I'll
And
check it out.
you
Okay.
can check it out. So because I couldn't
Okay.
come up with the name before. So see
Okay.
you soon.
See you soon in a month's time. Bye bye. Take
Bye.
care.